right, good afternoon. Hopefully you guys joined us for our virtual meetup today, but if you did not, I'm glad you're here. And if you did, I'm glad you're looking back and reviewing for our test tomorrow. So we're going to start off with this welcoming ritual this morning. We are going to look at what is called a political cartoon. So this is something that would have been featured in a newspaper or a comic strip, and it depicts what's going on with the country at the time. So we're going to read just a little bit about this political cartoon and then answer the questions. This picture is a political cartoon or a comic with a message. The cartoon is called Monopoly Millionaires Dividing the Country. So just take a second and look at the cartoon. Why do you think it's called that? It appeared in Puck magazine in 1885. The picture shows the powerful railroad owners and investors William Henry Vanderbilt, Jay Gould, Cyrus Westfield, and Russell Sage. After looking at the cartoon, we're going to answer these questions together. So take a moment and look at it. Be thinking about these questions. What do you think these men are doing? How are the knives being used? Why is one of the men rolling dice? How do you think the cartoonist felt about the robber barons and why? Okay, so go ahead and pause the video and tell someone around you. You can tell a family member. Maybe you have a pet that you want to talk to. So go ahead and pause the video and answer these questions. All right. So now that you've answered these questions, what do you think these men are doing? So we see that they are on the United States, this piece of land, and it looks like they are chopping it up. So they're using the knives to dice it up and split it into their own sections. Okay, we notice that there are only 5 men here. Okay, so there's not a bunch of people working together to build the country, okay? They are owning large portions of the country. What about the man rolling the dice? What do you think he's doing? Well, we could say that maybe he's gambling his portion, okay? We could also say that maybe he's gambling the people that are working under him. He doesn't really care much about them, but he cares more about the money he could make by making these investments. How do you think the cartoonist felt about the robber barons? Is this a happy picture or a sad picture? What do you think? I would say it's kind of a sad picture, right? Because he's upset that these 5 men are running the entire United States. Okay, and we can see that just looking at their faces. Okay, and what they're doing to the country. Okay, so we're going to go over our objectives for today. Here are our 3 objectives. Our first one is to review the Gilded Age for our test tomorrow. Okay, so that's what we reviewed this week. If you are not sure about some of the things that we talk about today, you need to go back and review. We're going to identify important people of the time and understand how people felt at this time. So before we play our game today, we have 2 ideas that we want to talk about. Okay, and these will be on your test, and you will be asked to give information about them. So this would be a good time to pay attention and really zone in. So first of all, there's the progressive movement. I want you to try to come up with as many ideas as you can about the progressive movement. What was it? Who cared about it? Why did it happen? So go ahead and pause the video and try to come up with ideas about the progressive movement. All right, so the progressive movement was a movement where people disagreed with the way that the country was being run. Okay, so at the time, there were a few people that were running the entire country because they were so wealthy, okay? And they had what was called monopolies, okay? And a monopoly is when you control all of one part of business. So you have the company that, for instance, you are able to sell all computers, okay? You would have a monopoly on computers. No one else is able to sell them but you. And this is what was really happening at the time. There were a few really big monopolies. And you can think about this like the game Monopoly, if you've ever played that. The object of the game is to get all the money, okay, and to own all the business. So there were a few people that had a lot of wealth, and there were a lot of other people that had very little wealth, okay? So there were a few very rich people and a lot of people that were poor at this time, okay? So people wanted that to end, and that's why they wanted to cancel monopolies, okay? All right. What about labor unions? Oh, and actually, before we move on to labor unions, the people that ran the monopolies were called robber barons. Okay, and that's going to be important. Okay, so now we're going to move on to labor unions. What is a labor union? Why is a labor union important? Okay, I want you to answer those questions. I also want you to answer, how did people feel about labor unions? So go ahead and pause the video and try to answer those questions. Okay, so labor unions were set up because people were being treated unfairly at companies. So, a labor union was created so that there could be leaders that went and met with the company and they would try to compromise. Okay, so they would try to come together and say, okay, well, you're not treating your employees fair, and your employees are a part of our labor union. So we want you to treat them fair by making them work less hours. Okay? And the company would come back and say something like, well, we have to make sure that they're working these hours because we have to get our product sold. Okay? Then the labor union would say, okay, well, let's reach a compromise. They need to be paid $2 more an hour to work these extra hours. And the company would come back and say, okay, well, what about $1 more? Okay, and so it would go back and forth until a compromise was finally reached. Okay, so they would work to find an agreement with the company. And if an agreement was not found, the employees of the labor union, or the people in the labor union that were employees of the company, they would go on strike. So we see that a lot during the Gilded Age. There's a lot of strikes going on. So what is a strike? A strike is where employees, so the people that work for the company, refuse to work until conditions are met. Okay? And most of the time, this is settled by the company making another compromise. Okay? So now that we've talked about that today, what I want you to do is I want you to go and play the Kahoot. That's going to be our review game for today. And make sure, if you're having any questions about labor unions, the progressive movement, anything that we've been talking about this week, make sure to message me on Schoology and I can help you with that. Okay? You want to make sure that you're ready for your test tomorrow. All right, great job, guys. You did an awesome work today. Make sure you review that game, and I will see you tomorrow.